In our text, God is in dialogue with the prophet Jeremiah. You remember Jeremiah's historic and prophetic call as he was called out of his mother's womb to deliver a prophetic and contentious warning to the children of Israel. We explore a text today in which God has encountered an array of problems with the children of Israel. But it was not always as such. To open this second chapter, God describes the relationship he once had with Israel. It's no surprise. You remember the children of Israel, they are God's chosen people. So he said, you know, our relationship, it started out real good. We had this lovey-dovey feeling on the outside. When I saw Israel, I tinged and I had this weird feeling come over my body. And when we started out, when Israel saw me, they got all gooey inside. He says, God says, I remember the devotion of their youth and how as a bride they loved me. They loved me so much that they'll follow me through the desert. Follow me when they had to walk. Follow me, they didn't have no water. Follow me when they didn't know what the next move was. That's how much they loved me. Y'all must don't understand that kind of love, because we got to know some stuff before. He said, no, they loved me that much that they followed me through the desert and even through the jungle. God essentially remembers a time when Israel was so in love with him that they had a devotion that was unparalleled. I think Israel's theme song came some years later. They had to have a song that describes their devotion to God. I think it sounds something like, ain't no mountain high enough. Ain't no valley low enough. There ain't even a river that's wide enough to keep me from getting to you. That was Israel's devotion. Not only does God mention their devotion to him, but he shows how much he treasured them. He says, they were holy unto me. They were separated from the rest. I pulled them out by myself. I called them to be my people. They were holy. God said they were so special. If anyone came upon them to do harm, I took over. That's why he was able to tell Jehoshaphat, don't worry, just stand still and see the salvation of God. That's why when coming up on the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army was behind him, God told Moses, just stretch out what I've given you. He said, look, I love you so much that I'll destroy other folk for you. Then the Bible say, touch not my anointed one or do my prophet no harm. But now, something happened. Somehow, the thrill was gone. The relationship had become strained. Theologian Cal Yates writes it like this. He said, the honeymoon is over. And now Israel has somehow abandoned their love for God. They abandoned their devotion to God. And somehow Israel, now they're actually in the promised land. They had become unfaithful in their relationship to God. Now, I don't need to sit up here and describe what unfaithful means, but if any of you have been in a relationship, this church must be too holy. I mean, y'all must ain't got no problems we got like in Augusta. But if any of you been in a relationship and somebody turned their backs on you, somebody was unfaithful to you, you know how much it hurts. So in this instance, God is now hurting. I don't understand why we think just because God is God that we think our actions don't hurt him. Baby, when you're unfaithful to God, God is hurt by your unfaithfulness. So in their promised land, they turned their backs. In their promised land, they found other things to love. In their promised land, they found other relationships to cherish. In their promised land, they found other gods to worship. In their promised land, they became content, then complacent, and they forgot about God. Don't be too hard on the children of Israel, because maybe we might be guilty of the same things. Often in our complacent moments, our focus begins to shift away from God and the things of God, and our will begins to replace God's will. We begin to rely on our own resources rather than on God's resources. We spend less and less time on our knees in prayer, and we spend even less time in our study. It almost enters into an arena as if we are attempting to pimp God. Jackson, what you saying? I'm simply saying, all of a sudden, when the storm clouds are raging, when the thunder is rolling, when the lightning is flashing, we find a way to holler Jesus. We find a way to come to the church house. We find a way to get on our knees. But when everything's all right, we seem to forget how to get on our knees. It seems as if we're trying to pimp God. Although his majesty and his nature won't allow that to happen, we tend to use God to get through our problems. Then when we're through our problems, we push God to the side. I submit to you today that in our spirits of contentment and complacency, and then we're going home, we forget some very important factors in our Christian walk. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with being content in life. But in your contentment, don't forget the reason who you are and where you are. The first problem with Israel is that they forgot where they used to be, and they forgot who brought them out. Verse 6, God tells Jeremiah to remind them of their days in Egypt. Remind them when they were in slavery. Remind them when Pharaoh was their oppressor. Remind them of the hardship they encountered. Remind them of the days they were crying out to me both day and night. Remind them of the pain of captivity and how it was nobody but myself who brought them out. Remind them it was me who went before them as a pillar of cloud by day, as a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Remind them it was me who brought them past the Red Sea. Remind them it was me who led them out of the wilderness. Then God's argument does not even stop there. He says, not only did I bring them out of a horrible situation, but in time I elevated them to an even better situation. See, now Israel's in Canaan land. You heard about Canaan land. You remember Canaan land. That was the land God had promised to Abraham. The promise went through Isaac and Jacob. You remember Canaan land. They got to Canaan land one time, and they were afraid to go over into Canaan land. God said, I'm going to keep you here 40 more years, but I'm going to still give you the promised land. Now they're in the promised land, and God's saying, not only did I bring you from your slavery, your oppressive days, but now I've taken you higher than where you thought you could go. So he's saying, I didn't bring you out, then tell you just to deal with life. I didn't bring you out of Egypt and leave you alone. I didn't bring you out and leave you by yourself. But I promised you a place. And God is saying the reason you find contentment is because of me. The reason you're able to have peace is because of me. But now you want to forsake me. Turn your back on me. Can we be in the same position as Israel? maybe some of us have forgotten where we come from. If your life has been all gravy to this point, you never had any problems, just throw your hands up and say, thank you, Jesus. But that ain't most of our story. Most of us have been in our Egypt situations. Most of us have been oppressed. You go to the doctor and the doctor tells you, look, you got an illness that we don't know what to do with. You've got an illness that we can't cure. You're in an oppressive state. You get home and find a pink eviction notice on your door. You're in an oppressive state. You find out that your bank account said you're in the red. You ain't got no money. And the money that's going to come in, it got to go to somebody else. You're in an oppressive state. It might just be me, but I've been oppressed before. I remember where I was. That's why when I am where I am now, I give all praises to God, because I know it wasn't like this always. And some of us, we get in our praise atmosphere and we sit down like everything been all good always. Now, baby, we've been through some stuff. Can we be real? A lot of us have been in some situations we really didn't believe ourselves we were going to come out. A lot of us have been in some places we don't know how in the world we got out. But now that we're survivors, we thank God because he did it. Some of us have been in some situations when folk ask you, how did you do it? The only thing we can do is say, God. How in the world did you get that job? I don't know. It was God. How in the world did you get approved for that car? It was God. Credit was all shot up. Credit was all messed up. It was God. How in the world did you find that man? It was God. How did you find that woman? It was God. How in the world did you get where you are? It was God. So now God says, now that you got what I offered, don't forget who hooked you up. Don't forget I hooked you up. Return the favor. You ain't even got to give me that much money. I just want 10% of that. But what I want is your time. Bring your behind the church Sunday morning. Find yourself in Bible study. Find yourself in Sunday school. Speak a word of life into somebody's life. Stop trying to cut folk out all the time. I just want you. We got to go on. We got to go on. I said I wasn't going to take all your time. We got to go. The second thing, not only did Israel forget where they were and who brought them out, but secondly, they forgot that they still belong to a sovereign God. As I read through this text, I noticed how God was talking to Jeremiah. God, even though Israel had turned their backs on him, God had never disowned Israel. He still refers to them as my people. He still calls them, he says, my folk, and he refers to himself as their God. Just because the children of Israel went astray, just because they were wayward, God doesn't lose his stamp of ownership